Reality.
Therapist perception.
Bachelorette.
Okay.
Reactivity TV. So for those of you who aren't familiar yet, Reactivity TV is our therapist perception of reality TV. So we are talking about Bachelor in Paradise, specifically the last 2 episodes, and we're going to talk a little bit about some things that we pulled away from it from this therapist perspective.
Yes, right. And so I was trying to remember, we're talking about episodes 2 and 3 or 3 and 4?
Well,
2 and
I guess it's 2 and 3, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Oh, it's confusing.
It is confusing.
This past Monday and Tuesday.
Yes, this past Monday and Tuesday. They are really jam-packing our October to make sure that we have all the Bachelor in Paradise content. And so, yes, we're talking about, I believe it's episodes 2 and 3, Monday and Tuesday of the week of October 3rd. Mm-hmm. And if you're not familiar with the show, you can still hang in. We're going to talk about, as Catherine said, like our therapist perspective and perception of what we're seeing on reality TV. And the reality is that they are still human beings. They are navigating through pretty intense relationships. And so there is still a lot to be learned here, and things that can be like taken out and applied to the actual real world and navigating dating and relationships, particularly today.
Yeah. No, and I think that that's a big takeaway that I've heard from a lot of listeners is that they're thinking that, or they might be people that aren't viewers of the Bachelor franchise things like we are, but they're still getting a lot of things out of it. So you might find that too. And also I've heard a lot of people that want to get into it after. So
yeah,
sorry for luring you in.
It's a trap. Okay. Well, do you want to kick us off with your moment or something that stood out to you this week?
Yes. So it bothers me to to have to talk about this because not the topic, but that it's the same couple that I was talking about last week.
I had the same reaction. I know where you're going.
Annoyed.
I was annoyed too.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I just wanted a little more variety, which then it was funny because then I feel like we got a little more variety at the end of the episode, and then I was like, oh wait, but let's go back to the drama over there. So anyways, I'm talking a little bit about Justin and Genevieve again. They were certainly taking up a lot of the time, in both episodes. And the thing that I really took away from it was the lack of expectations that were set between them to begin with. And I just kind of want to start out with saying what the expectations are of the cast going into the show, that didn't really seem to be either clear or maybe they just had these different expectations than certainly I have as a viewer, thinking like, oh, you're going to go in here and you're going to go and date a lot of people and see what works.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the premise of the show, and that's what makes it so fun and why I keep saying it reminds me a lot of like modern dating and dating apps and things, because the purpose of the show, I believe, is to go down to build connections and see if there's something there, see if there's enough of a connection to start dating and form a relationship, and maybe after 3 weeks get engaged.
Yeah.
That's so that with a straight face.
I know you did.
But that is the premise is like, yeah, you're meant to date. And sorry.
No. That's exactly what I was thinking. And it just didn't seem like that was certainly where Genevieve was coming from and how she, we talked a lot about anxiety in our last podcast. There was a lot of anxiety that she was definitely feeling when Justin went off on his date with Victoria, and she let everybody know about it, and that was really confusing because she was really upset, and she had a right to feel upset about the possibility of where her relationship could go, and yet there was still this part of, okay, but this is what you're supposed to do on the show. You're not supposed to just latch on to somebody at the beginning and then that's it. Which maybe that's where she was coming from, was just, I need you we're together, and now let's do this. Let's be on this show together. Let's be on this journey together. And he didn't have those expectations. It sounds like his expectations were kind of aligning with how you and I understand the show to be, where you just go on a date with a bunch of people and see what works. So,
well, and I think what was problematic between the two of them is that we saw and heard a lot about Genevieve, what her wants and needs were from this relationship. She told us in her face-to-camera interviews or in the moment interviews, she told her peers on the beach, but she didn't tell Justin.
yes.
She didn't tell him until after. And that, I think, was also kind of problematic, is that she wasn't communicating them directly to Justin beforehand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, exactly. And then when they eventually did come back around and talk about it, granted, she was feeling really emotional, so they definitely didn't have a productive conversation around the birthday cake scenario. The next day, it really seemed like they had kind of settled it and were going to move forward with some new expectations. But then it came back in reverse, where then she's going to go off on this date with Aaron, and then now Justin's upset and wallowing the whole day and thinking about how now things are over. And so that just didn't seem like it lined up either with their expectations. So it was like they didn't have expectations, and then they set some, and then they weren't living, or he wasn't living into that expectation. So that was really confusing and frustrating to see.
Yes. And I think he called Genevieve hypocritical for going on a date after she kind of made this whole fuss over him going on a date with Victoria. And I also thought that was really interesting. And I think he was kind of saying there's maybe a double standard here, which I didn't quite connect as much. But I also felt like there is this element that is not healthy that happens in couples where, or in relationships where someone will do something to piss off one of the people in the relationship, and the other person doesn't get it. And then when that person has an opportunity to give them a dose of their own medicine, they love it. And it felt like there was an element of that happening. I
want you to experience what I was experiencing yesterday.
Exactly. So I felt like, I don't know if that was going on, but that's kind of what I was reading. And so I just thought that does happen in relationships, especially when you're not being really overt about communicating what your needs and what your expectations are.
Yeah.
And I think what the alternative to this is much more vulnerable. If Genevieve were to say hey, I like you, I want to go all in on this relationship. I know it's early. I know it's been 24 hours. Because it's been 24 hours. But
and it's my birthday.
And it's my birthday. And but I really like you, and I want to see where this goes. And if he says I'm not there, or I actually want to explore other relationships or other connections, well, then she has that information and she can use it to inform what she does next.
Right.
But it seemed like she was trying to make a lot of assumptions or have these implicit expectations for what it meant that they spent a day together.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Because without saying, I like you, and without being overt, like you're saying, she just wanted to hear from him, I like you, and I want to see this through, and I want this and only this. And instead she was hearing, I want to explore what happens. I want to be able to, if somebody comes down, and I want to go on a date with them if I want to. That's all she was hearing, and not anything else that he had to say, or what she actually needed to communicate to him, which was more important, really.
Yeah, right. And we saw something similar play out with Jill and Romeo. That whole situation was really, really hard and messy and cringy to watch. But it seemed kind of similar, where it sounded like Jill had these wants and these expectations for what it meant that Romeo was saying, I want to pursue something with you. he omitted, like, well, you and other people, but she made a lot of assumptions about what that meant, or they didn't have a clear conversation. I won't just put all the onus on Jill. Romeo did not, like, convey, yes, I'm interested in pursuing you and other people, and so she was really blindsided by that. But again, lack of clear, open, honest communication, which is a lot harder up front, but it saves all of this messiness and, like, hard feelings after.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that, I mean, that's why it doesn't happen, because there is a little, there is a level of vulnerability that people need to get to then lay it all out, that can just feel too uncomfortable or maybe too soon to do. And yet you're right, it lays the groundwork for then later things being easier and things working well. Yeah, I mean, just setting expectations in general is just so important for any relationship, and that's why I wanted to talk about it, because if it's not happening in this show, if it's not happening in these other relationships, and relationships outside of the show, then there can be a lot of miscommunications. There can be a lot of just a lot of conflict and a lot of needs not being met that then lead to a lot more confusion and then more problems and more challenges to get over or not get over. And it can just be really way stickier to navigate later on if it's not just clear from the get-go.
Mm-hmm. As you're saying this, it's kind of making me think about, like, some of the tropes that I think people fall into in real life dating, that it felt like was happening with Genevieve, which is like, I don't want to come off as needy, or I want to be the chill girl, or whatever. Mm-hmm. And so, like, when we try to put on these personas, that it really gets in the way of us. Like, it's okay to have needs. Like, it's okay to have wants in a relationship. And if you can put out there what your needs are, then you might get information back that tells you, like, okay, well, we don't line up, and it's better to know. It's harder to know, but it's better to know. And I think that's, again, a trap I see people kind of fall into in real life, is being really afraid to communicate what you want and need up front because of how it might be perceived.
Yeah. Well, actually, there was a conversation between Lace and Logan where she did say that. She just was like, no bullshit. This is what I want out of this. And she kind of just, like, put her feelers out there. And he wasn't interested. But she just laid it out. Mm-hmm. She put it there.
Yeah. And I wonder how much of that, for Lace, being 32, being on the show before, she has more experience in dating, or dating in this world. Mm-hmm. And no bullshit. Just, like, let's just get to it. And you save a lot of time and heartache, potentially.
Yeah. Yeah. Because instead of you being left wondering, are they on the same page, you know. Mm-hmm. You know, at least you laid out your page, and whether or not it matches up with theirs is what that conversation is, rather than just this wondering and then the anxiety around it.
Right. I mean, we're so worried to be rejected. Meanwhile, rejection is information, and we need that information in order to have clarity and like, how we're going to move forward. Yeah. See, this is like real life.
Real. You go.
Okay. So my moment was like, a moment that felt like a badass moment mixed in, like, a real cringy moment. Yes. And so I wanted to talk about the interaction between Brittany and Romeo.
The face. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was super, super cringy.
That was very cringy.
Yeah.
And so if you didn't watch, what essentially happened is that Romeo, after being kind of like pursuing, I'll say, a relationship with Jill, he, like, feels secure in that relationship, and then he kind of goes off and decides, like, oh, hey, I want to see, like, who else I might want to form a connection with. And so he hits up Brittany.
Yeah.
And because that's what it felt like.
Yeah.
You know?
It really did.
And so he's sitting with her, and he's saying, like, I really want to explore a connection with you. And he's just not reading the room at all. The vibes were off. Like, I know that's not a clinical thing to say, but, like, there's no other way to say he was not reading her cues. She was not feeling it, not into it at all. But the important piece here is that Romeo had a rose. And so he decides a woman's fate on that show. The rose, if you get a rose, you stay. If you don't get a rose, you go home. And so he was saying to Brittany, hey, I want to pursue something with you. I feel like we might have something. I want to pursue this connection. And what I admired so much about Brittany is that she was clearly so secure and so comfortable in who she is and what she wants and what her standard is in a relationship, that she's...
Even though he had the rose.
Even though he had the rose and he had the power, literal power to over her dating life on the show, essentially. And she was not having it. And she said essentially, like, I like Jill. She's my friend. I don't feel good about this, and I don't feel a connection with you. Is essentially what she said. And
now this is a good time for me to kiss you.
And then, yeah, he still went in for a kiss after that, which she very, very artistically dodged. Yes. That was wonderful. Yeah. Wonderful work on her part. But she wasn't compromising who she is or what she wanted or a friendship in order to have a date. And I think, again, oftentimes in dating, when it feels like we're wanting someone to pick us so badly, or we might just like really, really want a relationship, or we really, really want a date, that we do put ourselves, our needs, maybe our sense of value, or what we'll accept aside in order to just have the thing, and we lose ourselves in that. And kudos to Brittany, because she didn't do that. And again, I felt like that was such a badass thing, because on the show so often we just see a lot of times people taking roses just to stay another week, or they might like maybe string someone along just to stay alive on the beach, and that's not what she did.
Yeah, she really risked it, but yeah, and it was worth it. I mean, it was worth her relationship with Jill, and for her to inauthentically get into something with Romeo, how fleeting that could have been, just to make sure that she could stay. A lot of respect for that.
She said she'd rather be hit by a bus than accept a rose from Romeo. That must have been a hard thing for him to watch back.
Yes.
So yeah. Okay.
Well, and then a lot unfolded with Romeo after that. But he then, when he did give his rose to Jill, he did say, this is for you, for us, or for you to pursue other relationships, which I'll give him some credit for, because he kind of came down off of this confidence that he was leading with.
It's the power of the rose.
Yeah. And then kind of just said, like, yeah, you may not want to be with me, but I still want you to be here. So that was nice.
That's the least he could do.
It was.
Okay, so like it sounds like our takeaways from this are, the importance of setting expectations up front when you are forming a relationship with someone, or when you're in a relationship with someone, and being clear about your wants and your needs, your standard in dating and relationships as well, and trying to stick to that. We will be chatting about episodes, let me do math, 4 and 5?
Yeah, 4 and 5.
4 and 5 next week.